Today I'm going to be showing you how to create custom hatches for Rhino and AutoCAD. The first thing we want to do here is go to the Rhinoceros forums and download the Make Hatch plugin. I found this link for version 6, which is the version of Rhino that I have. There may be newer versions that you'll need to find for newer versions of Rhino. So, first thing we're going to do is download the RHP file. And when we download that, we're going to want to save it to a location on our computer that we won't change. So this needs to live somewhere where you won't, move it or accidentally delete it. So either save it in your program files on your local disk or maybe in your documents folder, wherever you know that you won't accidentally delete the file. Once you save it to that directory, we're going to open up Rhino, and inside Rhino we're going to go to File, Properties, and then we're going to go down to Plugins. We're going to press Install, and we're going to navigate to the folder that we saved the RHP plugin file to. So I'm going to go to my desktop, I'm going to click on my folder here, and you can see I have the makehatch.rhp file right here. I'm going to hit open, and when I hit open, it automatically installs it. You can see here it loaded in. It says that it has loaded in successfully and that the plugin is enabled. So we're going to hit OK. And the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set your units in Rhino by typing in units, and set this to whatever unit you are planning on using this hatch with. So are you planning on drawing primarily in inches, feet? This isn't necessarily important for when you import this hatch pattern into AutoCAD, but you can use it as a check to make sure that your hatch is scaled properly. So in this instance, I'm going to set my model units to inches because I'm going to be opening it in AutoCAD in inches. I'll hit OK. And you can see here I've created a pattern already, and you can see that it's a perfect square and that some edges of the pattern don't have a line closing them and some edges do. And that's important because when we tile this pattern, we don't want these lines to sort of duplicate and overlap with each other, or else you'll get overlapping lines, and when you print off your CAD drawing, you'll see an extra dark line for where those lines overlap. So just make sure that you have no overlapping lines here, and make sure you try to simplify this as simple as possible. So you can see here, like, all my vertical lines are just one line. Sometimes when you're drawing, you might have a bunch of separate lines, right, that kind of make up your shape. And when you do this, it's just adding in extra data, and it'll kind of slow it down in AutoCAD when you're trying to place that hatch file, because it's going to have to place that many more line segments. The other thing too is if you were to import this into AutoCAD and then you want to explode it after you've already placed it down, you're going to get a bunch of individual line segments rather than these nice clean vertical lines or horizontal lines. So what we're going to want to do here is just verify that this is a perfect square. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the bottommost right extent of my pattern and just add a point there so I know that's sort of the bottom right, and then we have the top left up here. I'm going to type in distance, and I'm going to measure the distance on my X value, or sorry, we're going to do Y value first. So I'll measure my Y value distance. You can see here it says 96 inches. I'm going to do the same thing for the X value. So I'm going to click on my bottom left here and click on the point all the way to the right, which is the rightmost, bounding area of this pattern. And you can see it's also 96 inches. So the overall dimension of this pattern is 96 by 96 inches. Now that we know it's a square, we can move on to the next step, but I'll say this: if you don't make this thing a square, if you don't make your pattern a square, what will happen is it will stretch in whatever direction is the shortest. So for instance, let's add that point back just as a point of reference. So I'm going to put my point here in the corner. If I were to have a pattern that looked like this, when I bring this into AutoCAD and I try to use it, AutoCAD is going to stretch it to become a box. So it's going to end up looking something like, if I can do this, it'll end up looking something like this, which is obviously what you don't want because it's stretching the horizontal, which is making the dimensions something that you did not design for, right? So you need to make sure it's a perfect square, unless you don't care about the horizontal or vertical scale of this thing. You just want a pattern that you want to use for whatever reason. So with that being said, we can move on to the next step. Next step would be selecting all of the geometry or the line work, and you're going to type in make hatch. And you can see when you hit enter, it sort of gives you a preview here of 10 by 10 tile preview of that hatch. And this is kind of how you can tell if it's being built out properly, right? So you can see here, it's repeating nicely in both directions. I'm happy with it. So I could press enter and it would bring me to the next step, but I want to show you a couple of things here in the settings. So we have X padding, and you can see here, if I click on X padding and type in, let's say 5, you can see it's now added 5 units of padding on the X axis to the right hand side of this. Similarly, if I type in, or if I click in Y padding and I press 5, now you can see it's added 5 units of padding on the Y axis as well. So if for whatever reason you want padding around your pattern, you can do that. For these types of patterns where we're repeating things for like floors or, you know, ceilings, and you want it to be perfectly tileable, you'll want your padding to be 0 and 0. But if you have one large shape, say you made a star shape or a triangle or octagon, whatever that shape is, if you wanted to add padding around it, you could before you export this as a PAT file. So I'm going to set my X and Y padding back to 0. You can also see there is a setting here, decimation tolerance. This will essentially make the lower that this value is, the more precision your pattern will have. So here it's not noticeable at all because I'm just using vertical and horizontal lines. But if, say, you were trying to create, again, like a star or an octagon or maybe even a circle or a triangle, you'll notice that it might not be very precise when it's trying to replicate that pattern at this step. You can change the decimation tolerance to something lower, like 1 or 0.1 or 0.01, and it should give you quality back in that line work, the more complicated or complex line work that you're looking to use. So just be aware of that. And other than that, once you have the pattern that you want with your padding and your tolerances, you can just press enter. And it's going to ask you for a hatch name. I'm going to name mine FL-01, so floor 01. And it's going to ask for a hatch description. I'm going to type in a sentence here, but because Rhino interprets the spacebar as also being enter, you don't want to press the spacebar between each word. You're going to want to add either a dash or an underscore. So I'm just going to type in floor underscore pattern underscore 01. Again, you can write whatever you want in here as the description. I'm going to press enter, and then it's going to ask you to save the hatch as. I'm not entirely sure where the default save location is. If you press browse, it's going to browse to, I think, whatever folder you had open last or whatever folder your Rhino file is saved within. So make sure you just hit browse, and you can select the appropriate folder that you want to save your pattern inside of. And then I'm just going to name my pattern FL-01 with the file extension .pat, and I'm going to press save. Okay. Now, we're pretty much done here in Rhino. I'm going to keep this file open as a reference that I'll show you in a few minutes what I'm using it for. But I'm going to minimize Rhino. I'm going to open up AutoCAD. I'm going to open a new template. I'll just use the default AutoCAD template. And once it opens, I'm going to type in units. And I'm going to change the length type from decimal to architectural and make sure my scale is in inches, because that's what I exported the PAT file as in Rhino. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a square box. So I'm going to type in rectangle, and I'm going to make it 20 feet by 20 feet. Okay. So what we need to do is load our pattern file into AutoCAD here. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in options. And as soon as you type in options, the first tab that pops up is called files. And you'll see here there's a folder called support file search path. We're going to hit the plus arrow to the left of it. We're going to press add, and we're going to hit browse. And we are going to browse to the folder that contains our .pat file. Again, you don't want to be moving that .pat file around. You want to put it in a spot that you know it won't move, because if you move it, it will no longer be referenced to the folder, and when you open AutoCAD, you won't be able to use your hatch. So just save it somewhere where you're not going to touch it in the future. Then hit open, and you can hit OK. Looks like nothing happened, but if you were to type in hatch, and I'm going to show two ways of doing this. So you could either first click on settings down here after you type in hatch, and you can click on the swatch. You can go to custom, and you'll see that your FL-01.pat is in here. We can hit OK, and you can see here your angle is 0, your scale is 1. Hit OK, and then click inside your box, press enter, and now you can see our hatch pattern is in AutoCAD. Another way you could do this is you can type in hatch, and you can see here the hatch creation toolbar opens, and you can click this little down arrow under the patterns, and you can search for the pattern, right? So ours is FL-01. We can select it, click inside our box, hit enter. Achieves the same result, just two different ways of doing it. Now, remember when I said I had Rhino open? That's because I want to check to make sure that the scale is right, that this imported at the proper scale, so I know that I'm using the correct units, and I know that it's placing it accurately onto or inside of whatever pattern I choose to use for the hatch. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to Rhino, and I'm going to type in distance again, and I'm just going to go into my pattern here and find one of my patterns that I know the dimensions of. So I know that this rectangle here is 12 inches wide by 24 inches tall. So if I click here and click here to find the horizontal distance, you can see it's 12 inches. If I click again and go vertically and click, you can see it's 24 inches. So 12 by 24. Now, when I go back to AutoCAD, I am going to do the same thing. So I'll type in dist for distance. And this is a hatch, so you can't like select the vertices or the endpoints or anything, but we can kind of get a close approximation. So I'm going to click, make sure I'm doing the right one here. I'm going to click here. Oh, and of course it's going to sort of snap me down to the bottom. That's fine, I can do it here too. So you can see here, okay. Well, this is a sort of peculiar situation here. So when I placed this inside of the box, it didn't actually put this pattern into the exact location that we want, right? So my widest member here, this 12 by 24 piece, you can see it's actually shifted over. That's just, because AutoCAD doesn't know how we want to tile this thing. I think we could change the offset of the tiling in AutoCAD to kind of align, if we want this shape to be leftmost, we can go into it and drag it over. I'm not going to get into how to do that. You should be able to find a tutorial on how to move a hatch inside of AutoCAD. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to try this again. I'm going to turn off snaps. You can see here, if I click on this point here, kind of go over to this point here, you can see it's 1 foot or 12 inches. And if I go vertically, you can see here it's 2 feet or 24 inches. So we know that it came in and it's scaled properly. And really, that's it. That's all you need to do to create a custom hatch inside of Rhino, export it as a .pat file, and then use that hatch pattern inside of AutoCAD. So I hope you liked the video. Thanks.